Hello there. I wanted to take an opportunity to create a couple of videos that are just going to be quick and easy that you can reference when needed, especially in these beginning stages of learning Creo. Sometimes it can be kind of complex, and I want you to have some resources here to be able to go to when you are maybe working independently or off campus. So I wanted to start by just kind of peeking at our learning plan and showing you the handouts that I have out there for you to get started. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And right now, you should be seeing our Canvas shell. And I'm in the modules area, and I'm in particular going to be looking at module part 1. And this is where we get that introduction to Creo and really kind of like opening it up and getting started. So I'm going to click on that intro to Creo. And in that intro to Creo, there are two handouts that I have here. One is going to be starting Creo files, and the other one is going to be saving and closing. So I'm gonna open that up right now. And this is a procedure that you would go through in starting up a Creo file. It is different than other Windows applications that you're probably really familiar with. So it is important to take a moment and make sure that you understand this process. And then you can use this handout in the future as you need to in the beginning stages here, to be sure that you are doing all the correct things to get started. So this is here for you, but I'm going to go through this process in Creo in just a second. The other handout that we have is going to be, oops, I went back maybe a little too far, is going to be saving and closing Creo files. There is a little process there as well. So again, not as easy as just, saving and then closing out the program and you're done. There's some things in the background that we want to do, and I want to explain that as we go along. So we're going to be going through the process of starting Creo files and then saving and closing Creo files. So to do so, you want to have an open session of Creo. And you may have to X out of, some of the little boxes that pop up, and that's totally fine. But you want to get to a point where you have kind of a nice clean screen in the background here. And this is where we get started. First things first, which is again very unique with Creo, is that we need to select a working directory. That means we have to set up a directory that's going to be specific to where we're going to be saving all of our Creo files. And I don't want you to get fancy with this. I want you to just have a single directory that you're going to kind of, if you would, dump all of your files in. If you try to start creating folders, it gets a little dicey with Creo when it's trying to go between different directories later on, especially in the assembly mode. So the easiest thing to do, especially in these foundational classes, is just to put all of your files into one directory, and they're just going to be there. So you're going to plan more on the file name as opposed to putting things into directories that is, again, traditional to Windows, but Creo likes to be special. So what we're going to do is we're going to select that working directory. But again, before you do so, you have to have one in mind. So think about where you want to save. Maybe it's on a flash drive. Maybe it's on your OneDrive, depending on where you're planning to work the most. Okay. And it doesn't ever hurt to, have a backup as well. So I'm going to select my working directory, and mine happens to be on my OneDrive. So I am going to go to my OneDrive. Oh, I'm not seeing it here. Let me see it. There we go. My directories, there are my documents. And then I'm going to go to WCTC Creo, and I'm going to hit OK. And again, depending on where you have your place that you want to save to, you're going to simply navigate to there. And it can be on a flash drive. It can be on the hard drive of your computer. It can be on your OneDrive at WCTC like mine is. Okay, so now I am ready to start a new file. Before I do though, I want to kind of set up my environment, okay? And I'm going to do that by going to File, Options, and Options again. okay? And on the computers at WCTC, it won't allow you to, this won't save for the next time you go in. So there is a configuration file that will save. It'll prompt you to save, and you're going to want to then also direct that to where you want to be able to recall it at a later date when you come in. So you'll notice here that this comes up with the Creo Educational Edition options. And we just want to double check here, system appearance. Really nothing to do here as long as you keep it at the default. The default is going to match the environment that I have. So it'll be, I think, especially in these early stages, a little bit easier for you to navigate. The colors will be the same. You can change those things here, but just then know that it won't really look exactly like you see in, some of the demonstrations that I do. Model display. Here, I'd like you to change the default model display to isometric from trimetric. Okay, the default is going to be trimetric, and I want you to do isometric. It's more the typical one that we end up doing. And then the other thing that I'm encouraging you to do is to set the shade quality to 6. Now, the default should be 3. That's probably a little bit low, and you can get a crisper images on your models, but you don't want to go crazy with the number either, because you can make this quite high, and then your performance is going to start to lag. If you notice at 6 your performance is lagging, meaning like the redraws or the refreshes, then you can always put this number down again back to 3. Okay, and this looks good. All right, so we changed that to isometric. Just hit apply, and then we're going to go down to the Sketcher. Okay, and on the Sketcher too, there's just a couple little things here. Sketcher, this one we're going to probably go back in and out of a couple times. So it's just kind of remembering where this is at, but I'll also, prompt you and that needs to be done. And this is the place where we can reset our decimal places. Okay. I forget what the default is when you come into Creo, but 3 decimal places is where we're going to start. And most of the problems that we do will be 2 3 decimal places, but at times it might be 2 or 4 or something like that. So, so setting that at 3 and being consistent and matching it to whatever you're drawing is going to be what you want to do. And then we're going to kind of go down a little bit of a ways here, and where it says Sketcher Startup here, we want to make the sketching plane parallel to the screen. This saves us a little bit of a click or two when we are getting into our files. So so it's just kind of a convenience thing. If you don't do this, it is not a huge deal. Okay, and but it's just kind of a little bit of a time saver, and I'll point it out when we see it happen. And that's really all that you want to do. Okay, so we're going to just hit I don't think there's an apply on this. We're just going to hit OK, and it's going to save those settings. Now, if you don't do that step, it is not going to stop you from doing anything in Creo. Okay, it's just some things that are a bit of a convenience. Okay, and then if you did change anything, I did not, it's going to prompt you to save it as a configuration file. And you can then, again, save it where it's at if you're on a locally loaded version. But if you are on the computers at school, then you want to save it and navigate to someplace that you can grab it back again. And it might be in that working directory. Now, I'm gonna double check that my working directory is where I want it to be. So if I click here, I'm gonna look at the trail on the top here, and that is where I want mine to be. So I'm gonna say, okay, all right. And then now I am officially ready to start a new file. Okay, so setting the working directory is really the one thing that you want to make sure you do. The others are kind of like, yeah, that's nice to do for our environment. But if you don't do those option settings, you can still completely work in Creo. So, so I'm going to start a new file. And when we hit new, you're going to be prompted to choose the type of file that you want to create. Okay. And we're going to create a part file. It's going to be a solid. So type is part, subtype is going to be a solid. And then we also want to make sure that we have this checked for default template. Okay. Now, the file name here is going to be what we want to call our file name. In industry, it may be a part number that you're gonna file it in as, but for us, we're gonna reference the names of the files that we have here in our workbook as we look at the module assignments. I am just going to right now just do a test one file, just to give it a file name, okay, and just kind of show this process of getting into Creo. And I'm just simply going to hit OK. All right. And by doing that, you're now going to be prompted, and you're going to see this these planes on our screen, and this is going to be, you know, different than what we experienced in AutoCAD, because in Creo we are going to be working in a three-dimensional environment, a 3D environment, which means that now we're not only working with the X and the Y plane, we've got a Z plane as well, and we can look at this in different views. So each one of these planes are going to be mutually perpendicular to one another, but we're going to have a front plane, we're going to have a right side plane, and then we're also going to have a top plane. Okay. And those are going to, you know, sound familiar to us, because back in AutoCAD, those were our standard views. Okay. So, so this is where we start a file. Now, I'm not going to get into you know, creating any geometry just yet. But I just want to tell you that this is normal, and this is exactly where you want to be when you start a file. Okay. So when we do our demos on, for instance, our first sketches, then we will be picking a plane and then going in and creating some things. But now what I want to do is I want to close this file. Okay. And I want to, you know, prepare myself to either exit Creo altogether, or just, you know, kind of clean up the environment, close this file, and then be ready to open another file. Okay. If I wanted to start a new one. So, so to do that, I'm going to go up to, my file, and I'm going to save first. So it's kind of like saving for the last time, if you would, saying like, oh, this is exactly what I want, I'm good to go. And you're simply going to hit the save button, and then it's going to navigate. You're going to notice it comes up with, you're going to check your directory up here. It should be that working directory. It's going to automatically go there. So you don't have to navigate that by setting it before you entered into this new part. Okay. So here's my working directory. And then you'll notice at the bottom here, it gives me my file name, and it's that test1.prt. That means that it's a part file. Okay. And it says maybe if I wanted to, you know, change that, I could put something else in to save it to, but I want it to just default to that. So I can just simply hit OK. And now it's saved it into that directory. Okay. Now, if I hit that again, if I do some, you know, some manipulation of my file, and I say, okay, save it again, the second time that you do a save, it's not going to ask for that confirmation again. Okay. And then this is like the regular save in Windows. I could do a save as if I wanted to change its part number and maybe save it as something else, like it's going to be the beginning of maybe something different, and I don't want to recreate everything because I just need to change a feature or two. Save as can be used as that. And it's kind of like saving a copy, but now I'm giving it a new file name. Okay. Now, when we save, what ends up happening is Creo saves additional versions of it. So if I go right now to my file manager, and I'll pull it over here. Oopsie, where are you? Oops. There we go. My file manager, and I'm going to navigate to my working directory. Okay, I'm going to pull this down a little bit. I'm going to find where now these are all files that I have in here already. And this is going to be my test file. Okay, so I did test 1. And so that's my main value here. There's test 1, test 2, and test 3. Okay, now notice that over here, the modification has a timestamp associated with it. Okay, so this was my first file, this was my second file, and this was my third file. Now these are the actual files. These aren't compressed files. These aren't, you know, files that are less. They are actual files. They're backups. So if you save and you're like, you like work on it and something goes awry and you're like, ah, I wish I could go back to, it'll go back to the last time you saved. You can just pull up that other file and delete the other one. Okay. Now, because it keeps track of this, okay, the best place to kind of remove those extra copies is before we actually leave. Okay, so this is where when you exit, you want to think, okay, I'm going to save this one last time, just like we do, you know, in any other format. So I'm just going to do that file save one more time. All right, so now there's going to be 4 of them out there. Okay, so if we check one more time, you're going to notice that I'm going to have that fourth one out there, documents, Creo, all the way down to the bottom. Yep, there's that fourth one, and it did this last timestamp here. Now, yes, you could go back. Let's say if you don't delete these out of Creo before you exit, you could go back and you could delete them, but then you have to, I mean, so you got to be careful that you don't delete the wrong file. Okay, so I'm going to close this up, and we're going to do it through Creo before we actually close our file. So we're going to go to File, Manage File, and we're going to say delete those old versions, because the last one that I did, it knows the last one that I did is like the official one, and that's the one I want to keep. So I'm going to delete those old versions. Do you want to delete the old versions? And you want to say yes. Okay. Yes. Now it's going to have as many versions out there as many times as you saved. So there could be 10 of them. Maybe you're working on it for a while and you've got 10 versions. That's okay. All right. But just know that those are 10 individual files with all of the geometry, with all of the data, and it's taking up space on your computer. Okay. So now if I go back and I go back to my, my directory here, and I find my documents, Creo, and I go all the way down to the bottom, look at that. I only have one version of that test one, and it does have the .4 on it because that was the fourth version, and that's fine. And you can always change that part number if you want to, but it just kind of, lets you know that that is the most current version. And now you can go out and now you only have that most current complete one version of that file. Okay. Not out yet. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I can hit close at this point. Okay. I can hit close. Now you think, all right, I'm ready to start a new file. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly what they're called. I think I've heard them called like crumbs, if you would. Creo leaves little crumbs in the background that you don't see. So we have to go to File, Manage Session, and we're going to go to Erase Not Displayed. Now, if there isn't anything in the background, this is going to be grayed out, but notice that it is available for us to do. So we're going to hit Erase Not Displayed, and look at there. It's still in the background environment. And if you don't erase this, it's not going to do anything to the file that you're going to be working on next. But what's going to happen is it could be slowing down your system. Okay. And we want it to perform to an optimal level. So we're just going to hit OK. And now if we do that one more time, just as a check, if we have managed session, erased not displayed, I'm sorry, it is up there. I thought we'd gray it out. Now it's not coming up with the dialog box. So we're all good. Okay. Now we can do one of two things. We can start a new part file, or we can just exit out if you're done with Creo. So these are the steps you need to go through. So so now if I wanted to start a new file, okay, if I wanted to start a new file and say like test 2, and I'm going to say okay. Now at this point, if I go back and I look at my options, it's going to retain those options that I set up for the session of Creo that I started in the very beginning. So if I go back over here to my sketcher, it's going to remember my 3 decimal places, and it's going to remember that I had checked make the sketching plane parallel. Okay, so I don't have to redo that. All right. And if you have a locally loaded version, it's going to remember these settings the next time you go in. You do not need to redo those. But if you are at WCTC, then you're going to have to pull up that config file or change those couple of things or not. Like I said earlier, it doesn't stop you from doing anything in Creo. It just is a couple of convenience things that, I don't know, as a preference, when I do modeling, it's what I find easier. Okay, so we're going to go through that process one more time of closing. We're going to do a manage file, delete any old ones, and then we're going to do a file. We're going to close. And then we're going to do a file, manage session, erase not displayed. There it is, test 2. Okay, in the background. And then I'd be ready to start a new file. But maybe I'm ready to, just exit out. Once I've done those things, I'm going to go file, exit, and now I can exit Creo and I'm all set. Yes, it is a process, but like I said, once you go through this a couple times, you'll get used to it, and it'll just be something that you just do. Okay. So I wanted to do that little bit of a demo there so that you had, you know, just those insights on going in and out. If you do need to go back and reference, whether you watch this video or you're going to notice that we have these 2 handouts here that you can follow along as well. All right. So, have fun working with Creo. It's fun.